Welcome to The Bitter Witness.
Don't be scared.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Rebecca, and I'm your host for The Bitter Witness. I hope you've had a good week. The production is over. It was an amazing production, and I'm so glad I can add my character in this play to my repertoire. I came home and I slept for about 12 hours straight after the last show. But as you very well know, there is no rest for the wicked. So for the past few days, I have been dividing my time between working in my gardens and researching and writing this episode for all of you. I have too many gardens, and yet I always seem to end up with more gardens by the end of the summer. I love being in the garden. During the summer months, if you can't find me, look to the gardens. Well, that's about it from my little corner of Ontario. Let's get the business out of the way, shall we? If you like this episode or any episode, please head on over to the Patreon page and give the show some love. For less than a package of seeds, you can help me keep bringing you crime cases each week. You can also support the show on Spotify, and don't forget to give the show a 5-star review over on Apple. Apparently, it helps the show in the ridiculously ununderstandable algorithm. Like, follow, and share the show on whatever platform you're listening to. Stop by our Facebook page and leave a comment, or share a post with everyone you know, or don't know for that matter. Everyone is welcome here. That's enough of the business. Let's get to this week's case. The dogs are sleeping behind me, so puppy ASMR will be brought to you by both Miley and Piper this week. So grab a cup of tea, pour a shot of something stiff in it because this shit rat is something of a prize, and sit back and relax while I tell you about the case of the Crackhead killer. As always, I want to give the victims in the case top billing. But sadly, as in many of our cases, there are multiple victims. So to all those and their loved ones who were harmed in any way by this case, I acknowledge you and I send my love to you wherever you may be. The true depravity of a serial killer lies not just in the act of taking a life, but in the calculated and often ritualistic violation of human dignity that precedes and follows it. It's a chilling descent into a moral abyss, where empathy is absent, replaced by a twisted gratification derived from control, suffering, and holding the perceived ultimate power over another human being. Victims are often reduced to mere objects, their lives stripped of meaning and purpose, becoming pawns in a macabre game played out in the killer's mind. These types of killings are a corruption of the human spirit that defies understanding, leaving a stain on the very fabric of society. Sex workers too often find themselves the coveted target of those who dwell in said moral abyss. The vulnerability of sex workers is tragically amplified by their marginalization. Operating on the fringes of society, they often encounter stigma, which make them easier to isolate and control. This precarious position, coupled with societal biases, can lead to the erroneous and dangerous assumption by some serial killers that these victims would be missed less, or that police investigations would be less thorough, further increasing their risk. The motivations behind serial killers are rarely simple, typically stemming from deeply ingrained psychological disturbances that manifest in violent and disturbing ways. Tragically, certain segments of the population are disproportionately vulnerable to such individuals. Those experiencing poverty or working in the sex industry, often marginalized and devalued by society, are at increased risk of becoming victims of crime and exploitation. Furthermore, when victims belong to a marginalized community, their experiences are often dismissed or minimized, perpetuating a cycle of injustice. This societal indifference can hinder access to resources and healing, compounding the trauma they endure and ultimately allowing the cycle of violence to continue unchecked. On July 14, 2002, a nude body of a woman, 43-year-old Janice Irvine, was found a few blocks from Prince Street in Phoenix, Arizona. Sadly, there is no information on Janice whatsoever anywhere on the internet. Not surprisingly, her case went cold quickly. On September 11, 2002, police discovered the body of Barbara Codman in an alley between East Prince Street and East McKinley Street in Phoenix. 46 years old, born in Alameda County, California on February 19, 1956, and according to a post on Ancestry.com by a Leslie Fredrickson, Barbara had been a friend of hers. According to Leslie, Barb never judged anyone. She never hurt or wronged and just wanted to live a simple life. Her sensitive nature and constant will to help others in even the smallest of ways spoke volumes of her character. She was an excellent keeper of secrets, loved surprises, and telling jokes. She had a way of making others smile or forget they were having a bad day. Leslie often teased her that she should have been a blonde due to her cute, dingy way about her. She was naively innocent in many ways. She trusted people and always believed in the best of them. She was the cheerleader in everyone's corner, always having words of encouragement to show her support. Barb loved to sit out in the sun and read. She enjoyed sitting and talking with others, learning about their lives. She was so inquisitive and soaked up every word. At the time of her murder, Barb had recently been released from jail, and she was currently taking meds to help her fight an addiction to heroin. She missed her daughter terribly and was working hard to reunite with her. Barb also had a sister who she was estranged from, and according to Leslie, Barb really wanted to rekindle that relationship. Leslie and Barb would sit and drink coffee and talk about whatever came to mind. Leslie stated in her post she missed Barb and that Barb had a heart of gold. Barb was found naked. Different parts of Barb's body were in different stages of decomposition. Her head and neck were more decomposed than the rest of her body, and there was skin slippage on her breast and inner thighs. Police found drag marks from the sidewalk into the alley, as though Barb's body had been dragged and left. You may be asking yourself, what exactly is skin slippage? Well, it's probably what you're thinking. Skin slippage occurs when bacteria destroys the connections between the skin and the underlying tissue, so that if there is pressure or movement on the body, the skin will begin to detach and slip off the body. It is similar to a degloving incident of a live human being. Literally, the skin comes away from the part of the body where it's supposed to be. Terrifying if you are the one to discover a body suffering from skin slippage. According to the Magic Google box, skin slippage can occur usually within 24 hours and up to approximately 5 days after death. So this means that Barb didn't just die right before she was found. And don't forget, there had to have been some pressure or movement on the body for the skin to slip. Because Barb's head and neck were in such a state of decay, Dr. John Hugh, a pathologist, was unable to conduct a detailed investigation into those specific areas of Barb's body. And because of the level of decomp, he was unable to find any trauma in Barb's head and neck area. When the toxicology reports came back on Barb, it was found that Barb had morphine and cocaine in her system. Dr. John Hugh stated the cause of death to be drug intoxication, a combined toxicity of the two drugs. However, he left the manner of death as undetermined. Hugh stated that he left the manner of death blank because he felt that Barb's death was rather suspicious. You think, Johnny? You just found a naked woman dead in an alley with advanced decomposition. You really think she's been lying there in that alley for that amount of time with no one reporting her dead? So why would Barb's head and neck have more advanced decomposition, you may be wondering? I was wondering that myself. There are several factors that can speed up the process. For example, if a part of the body is closer to the ground than other parts, insect activity could increase the speed of decomp. If a specific area of the body is exposed to sunlight, that would also speed up the decomposition process for that specific area. Or, on the opposite side of the spectrum, areas covered by clothing might decompose slower than those that are exposed to air. On October 10th, 2002, in the very same alley that Barb was found, drag marks from the sidewalk into the alley were present, and at the end of those drag marks was another body. This body belonged to 31-year-old Shanteria Davis. Shanteria was born on January 1st, 1971. And that, sadly, is all I could find regarding Shanteria. Shanteria's body, like Barb's, was naked and in an advanced state of decomposition. As well, Shanteria's body showed similar signs of skin slippage, the same as Barb's. Dr. Kevin Horn performed the autopsy on Shanteria, and similar to Barb, Horn was unable to determine a cause of death for Shanteria due to the level of decomposition of her body. And again, similar to Barb, Shanteria had high levels of cocaine in her system. Horn claimed the cause of death as cocaine toxicity. On February 27, 2003, police found the body of Jade Velasquez. Jade's body was found just outside a backyard gate of a house with a camper in the laneway. And where Jade was found was just across the road from the alleyway where the other bodies had been found. Jade had ligature marks on the front and sides of her neck and bruising under her left eye. Investigators noticed there was disturbance on the ground close to the gate. They stated that to them it appeared the gate had been taken off of its hinges and then put back on. On the sidewalk between Jade's body and the gate, investigators found what appeared to be drag marks. Again, it seemed that Jade's body had been dragged and placed where she was found, just like Barb and Shanteria's. Police spoke with the woman who owned the home with the back gate, Amelva Willis, but she had no idea who Jade was, and since she was on the elderly side, investigators knew there was no way she could have physically dragged the bodies of all three women. Jade was a military veteran and a member of the White Mountain Apache tribe. Jade had regular issues with drug addiction, which frequently led to finding herself in abusive relationships. Jade's children were eventually sent to live with their grandparents. According to Jade's daughter, her mother was an incredible person, a beautiful, smart, vivacious, strong, funny, engaging, attractive woman, although not a great parent. But the two are not mutually exclusive. Jade excelled at sports, especially basketball. She was tribal royalty and served in the Army in the 90s. She was awarded medals in rifle and hand grenade expertise. According to Noelle, when she and her sisters were living with their mother, they traveled often and didn't stay at any one place long. Noelle stated in an interview that most places they stayed at were homeless shelters for battered women and children. On March 29, 2003, police found Sharon Noah's body approximately 15 feet from the spot where they had found Jade's body a month earlier. Sharon had ligature marks on her neck and skin slippage on her inner thighs, breasts, and hips. There were maggots found on Sharon's body, and her hand and foot were mummified. As well, several of Sharon's artificial nails were broken. From the mummified hand and foot, you might think that Sharon had been dead for a while, but that is not necessarily so, for a couple of reasons. The first reason are the maggots that were present. Flies are immediately attracted to a dead body and lay their eggs. Maggots will begin to appear within 24 hours or so. And the second reason is that these murders are taking place in Phoenix, which has a very dry climate. And through desiccation, which is the process where something becomes thoroughly dried out or completely dried out, mummification through desiccation can occur within just a couple of days. So chances are, with all those items factoring in, Sharon had probably only been dead a couple of days at most. Sharon's autopsy showed that she had died of ligature strangulation. Toxicology reports showed that there was cocaine and GHB in her system. But according to the reports, there were not enough drugs in her system to cause an overdose. GHB is also known as the date rape drug. It is a clear, odorless liquid which perpetrators usually drop into someone's drink. At low doses, it can cause a person to feel affectionate and playful, have a loss of inhibitions, increased sensuality, and have enhanced sexual feelings. So when some shit snake puts a couple drops in your drink, you simply start to feel frisky. But if they put a large dose, you will start out frisky, and then as the drug enters your system more and more, headaches, dizziness, vomiting, difficulty breathing, memory loss, and an inability to move while still being conscious, and finally, loss of consciousness. So for the love of God, don't leave your drinks unattended at a bar. After Sharon's body was found, the woman who lived on one side of Melva Willis's house built a 10-foot cement fence surrounding her home. I don't blame you one bit, girl. 4 female bodies found in the alley on the other side of your yard? I'd be digging a bunker and not coming out until they caught the bastard who was doing it. On April 12, 2003, police were called to Melva Willis's home. Melva and her husband, Ron, had been noticing flies swarming around and a really bad smell coming from the camper that was parked in their laneway. Ron and Melva had been letting Melva's nephew stay in the camper until he was able to get back on his feet. When Ron entered the camper, he found the body of 39-year-old Julie Castillo. Listen, if you ever see swarms of flies inside anything, anywhere, don't go in. Just maybe call the cops. especially if there's a putrid smell coming from where the flies are. Even if there isn't a body in there, whatever is in there is going to be bad. Like, really bad. I've seen the Amityville Horror. Julie was found nude, lying on the floor of the camper near the bed. Her body was in an advanced state of decay, and there was a necktie around her neck. The autopsy determined that Julie had been dead between 3 and 7 days. Because Julie's body was in a state of advanced decay, the pathologist couldn't find any trauma on the body. But based on the police report, the pathologist stated that the cause of death was probable ligature strangulation. Julie had a blood alcohol level of 0.12, and there was some cocaine found in her system as well. The pathologist also found what he described as 7 defects radiating from her anus, but he couldn't determine if the defects were caused by trauma or decomposition. The police arrested Ron and Melva's nephew, one Cory Deonn Morris. Morris had been staying with his aunt and uncle in the camper in their laneway. He had only used the camper to sleep in and had complete access to their home for everything else. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have just been introduced to maybe one of the sickest shit rats that we have met to date. And from our list of episodes, that's saying something. Cory Deonn Morris was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma on May 10th, 1978. So that would make him, let's see here. A shit bull Taurus, which is fitting because, as you'll see, every time this shit rat opens his mouth, he literally spews bullshit. Morris was the oldest of 3 children, and the family has been described as a close-knit working-class family. They lived next to a military base. A childhood friend stated that Morris was a sweet kid growing up. Another described Morris as gentlemanly. Morris didn't really get into that much trouble out and about, although one time he did shoot out a streetlight with a BB gun and got in a little bit of trouble. He attended Douglas High School in Oklahoma City, where he earned straight A's and did a lot of volunteer work with charities. When the Oklahoma City bombing occurred, he went out and collected canned goods for the victims. When Morris went to college, he also entered the ROTC, which is the Reserve Officers Training Corps. So just a little side note here, I had no clue what the ROTC actually was. I've heard it used hundreds of times throughout my life, and I just figured it was some kind of military school. But it's actually a military officer training program. So what the ROTC does is it exchanges college scholarships for military duty. According to our magic Google box, the ROTC is the largest source for the military for commissioned officers. Interesting. Best guess is that growing up next to a military base and seeing it every day probably influenced Morris's decision to join the ROTC. Shit Rat Morris wanted to be an officer in the military. At 22 years old, Morris decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not 100% sure why he went there, but when he got there and had nowhere to live and no job, he asked his Aunt Melva and her husband Ron if he could live in a camper in their laneway until he got back on his feet. And being the wonderful people that they are, Ron and Melva agreed. Shortly after he had moved to Arizona, Morris went back home to Oklahoma City for a visit, and upon his arrival, he was wearing a military uniform and told his friends that he was in the Army. but I couldn't find any record of him actually being in the Army, only the ROTC during his college years. Jesse Collins was Ron and Melva's next-door neighbor in Phoenix, and he described Morris as a friendly young man and seemed quite outgoing. The woman who built the cement fence said she never suspected that the killer could be Morris. He always seemed so pleasant. It's always the ones you don't expect, isn't it? She stated in an interview that Cory was cool. He used to play football with the neighborhood kids and he would throw the ball over the wall. Morris eventually got a job 3 nights a week at a local bar in Phoenix called Fat Cats as a karaoke DJ. There, his co-workers called him Huggy Bear because he was just so nice. Trivia time. What 70s show had the character Huggy Bear in it, and who played the character? Quick, do you know? It was Starsky and Hutch. Oh my God, I loved watching that show when I was a kid. Huggy Bear was played by Antonio Fargas in the original series back in the 70s. And Snoop Dogg played Huggy Bear in the 2004 remake movie. Huggy Bear was Starsky and Hutch's confidential informant, known for his street smarts, stylish clothing, and owning a bar, which at first was called Huggy Bear's. Back to the case. The owner of Fat Cats, a man named Jimmy, stated in an interview that Morris would always come to work early and stay late. He would even take out the trash at night so the girls wouldn't have to go out in the dark. He was a true gentleman and never hit on or tried to pick up any of his female coworkers. Jimmy's wife Karen stated that Morris was a really, really nice guy while at work, but he did smell bad. Like, really bad. Like putrid bad. Karen stated that at one point, Jimmy had to speak to Morris about the putrid aroma emanating from his body. Morris explained to Jimmy that he smelled the way he did because he had to walk to work and he would sweat profusely in the heat. Okay, I get it. Phoenix is ridiculously hot, and I would love to visit sometime, but never want to live there. But isn't that kind of what deodorant or antiperspirant is for? Sweat doesn't smell that bad if you use deodorant. I mean, there can still be a sweaty smell, but it's not a putrid smell. Really, the only bad thing I could find about Morris and his work was that he had told his coworkers that he had served in the Army, which was a lie. But in the grand scheme of things, not all that bad when you compare it to a bunch of murders. All in all, Morris was one of the most trusted employees, and he would often stay after closing when a female bartender was working alone to make sure she got to her car safe when she was done. When police interviewed Morris about Julie Castillo, he admitted to knowing her, and he admitted to knowing what happened. He gave 2 accounts to what happened to Julie. In the first story, Morris said that he had brought Julie back to his camper because it was cold outside and she needed a place to sleep for the night. Morris said that Julie asked him if she could smoke some crack in the camper, and Morris agreed and left the trailer so she could consume her drugs. He returned a while later and found Julie unconscious on the floor. He told police that he took her clothes off of her because she had urinated on herself. He left her on the floor of the trailer, apparently thinking she was just enjoying the high, and the next day he went to work at Fat Cats. When he returned home from work that night, he realized that she was dead. So, like any shit rat would do, he went to bed and left Julie lying on the floor of his camper. Police asked Morris if he had had sex with Julie. Morris stated that he had never had sex with Julie, but that he had ejaculated in his sleep, but that he was facing away from Julie's body when that happened. Does that happen? Do men really lose their erectoplasm while they're sleeping? We should look at the magic Google. No, wait. I don't think I really want to know. Moving on. Police told Morris that they didn't believe his story, and so Morris offered them another story. And just an FYI or heads up, he does this for all 5 victims, so strap in. In Morris's second version of the story, he said that he brought Julie back to his camper to have sex with her, and that during sex, Julie asked him to choke her with a necktie. He complied with her request, and during the erotic asphyxiation, Julie lost consciousness and died. He stated that he stayed in the camper with her for 2 days, and then left the camper and went somewhere else for 3 days, and left Julie's body in the camper. So basically, leaving her inside a metal can for 5 days in Phoenix, Arizona. No wonder there was a smell and flies everywhere. What a piece of shit. From the injuries found on Julie's body during the autopsy, it was decided that Morris had engaged in necrophilia with Julie's body. Police then asked Morris about the other bodies that had been found in the alley and area across from his aunt's property. Morris told police that he had met Barbara Codman while he was out walking at night. He stated that Barb agreed to $20 for sex. Barb then accompanied him back to his camper. Morris said that after they were finished having sex, he stepped outside of his camper for a bit to get some air. And when he came back inside, Barb was sitting naked on his bed using drugs. Morris told Barb to leave when she was done taking her drugs, and he left the camper again. The second time he came back inside the camper, Barb was still sitting on the bed, but this time she was panting, and shortly after his return, Barb collapsed and died. Morris said that he put Barb's body onto a sleeping bag and dragged her out of the camper and over to the alley where she was found. Police again told Morris they didn't believe his shit. So Morris immediately came up with a second version of his story. In this version, Morris stated that Barb had agreed to take $20 for having sex with him, but this time, during sex, Barb asked him to choke her with a necktie. When he did, she collapsed unconscious and died. Morris then went through Barb's belongings and kept Barb's purse, panties, and overalls that she had been wearing. When police had arrested Morris, he actually had Barb's social security card, driver's license, and check cashing card in his wallet. Okay, so it wasn't that you were just choking her during sex, which, with any normal person, if that's what you want, that's fine, but there should be a safe word. There's always a safe word, number one. And number two, you fucking strangled her to death. You murdered her, you asshole. This guy is a fucking monster. Police then moved on to Shantiria's murder. Morris again said that he knew Shantiria and that she had agreed to have sex with him for $5. Shantiria had accompanied Morris back to his camper, and after they finished having sex, Shantiria wanted to do some drugs, so Morris left the camper for about an hour. When he returned, Shantiria was unconscious but breathing. Thinking she was out for the night on her high, Morris covered her with a blanket and left the camper, heading for a friend's house, where he stayed the night. When Morris came back to his camper the next morning, Shantiria was dead. That night, Morris dragged Shantiria's body into the alley and left her there to be found. But like all the rest of the confessions, police told Morris he was again full of shit, and Morris immediately came up with the second version of what happened. According to the second story, Shantiria had agreed to have sex with Morris for $5. She came back to the camper, and during sex, Shantiria removed her hair extensions and asked Morris to choke her with them. When Morris did what she asked him to do, Shanteria died. You smell that? That's a big steaming pile of Huggy Bear bullshit, that is. I don't care who the woman is. There is not one woman on this planet who would pull out their hair extensions while having sex and ask a man to choke her with them. I don't care what color the woman is, white, black, purple, orange. I don't care. This scenario would never happen for a couple of reasons. First, hair extensions are fucking expensive. Some of us women sell our kidneys to pay for our hair extensions. Second, extensions are a pain in the ass to put in. There is no way we would take them out until it was time to take them out. So, there is no way Shanteria pulled out her hair extensions to be choked. Police found Shanteria's hair extensions in the camper, and they found Morris's DNA under Shanteria's fingernails. Best guess? Morris pulled them out, and Shanteria started fighting back. Then the police moved on to Jade's murder. Morris stated that Jade was a friend, and that she had agreed to come back to his camper and have sex with him. He stated that Jade was extremely drunk and passed out before they could have sex. After Jade passed out, the shit rat went to sleep and woke up to Jade dead. Then he went to work, and that night he dragged Jade out to the alley like all the others. I don't even know why this guy even tries the first story, because nobody believes his shit and it's just bull. So why doesn't he just give the second? I mean, what is the game here? I think he just likes to hear himself talk. But in his second version of Jade's death, Morris stated that he and Jade were friends and that she had agreed to have sex with him. The two went to his camper, and Jade asked Morris to choke her with his hands while they were having sex. Morris did, and while he was choking her, Jade lost consciousness. Morris stated that he redressed Jade before he dragged her out to the alley because she was a friend of his and he didn't want her to be left in the alley naked. Well, I mean, that makes sense. Enough of a friend to not let her be found dead and naked, but not enough of a friend not to strangle her and murder her. What a piece of moldy shit this asshat is. Next came Morris's version of Sharon Noah's death. But just before we hear what this shit rat had to say, you should know that Sharon Noah had the mental age of a 10 or 12-year-old. My hands are balled in fists. According to Morris, he met Sharon while he was out for a walk. The two went back to his camper and had sex. Morris stated that he left after the two had sex because Sharon wanted to use drugs. Sharon was dead when Morris returned to the camper later. Morris stated that he put a belt around Sharon's neck and used that to pull her body into his sleeping bag. And later that night, he dragged her body over to the alley. Morris stated that he had thrown away all of Sharon's clothes except for her shoes. In the second version, Morris stated that Sharon had asked him to use the strap from his gym bag to strangle her during sex. Morris stated that once Sharon's eyes closed, he stopped strangling her, but she was dead. He stated that he used the strap to pull Sharon's body into his sleeping bag, and then he dragged the sleeping bag with Sharon's body over to the alley. Okay, let's just stop for a second. There are a couple of things I want to point out here. The first is that there is a possibility that Sharon consented to have sex with this piece of shit. Adults who have lower mental ages, like Sharon, with the mental age of 10 or 12, have an adult body with adult hormones, but they don't have the level of intelligence to understand how to deal with those feelings in a proper and safe way. So she may have consented, but it wasn't really consent because technically Morris was asking a child to have sex with him. So, as far as I'm concerned, it is still rape. In fact, I would put my money on that Morris somehow lured Sharon to his camper with something like candy or jewelry or makeup or a puppy or something like that, a present of some sort. I think that he strangled her the instant she got inside the camper. We know that with Sharon there was sexual penetration and ejaculation, but I would put my money on this occurring after death. Sharon would have been terrified if he had tried to rape her, and she would have and did fight back. Sharon was the one with broken fingernails, and the police did find some of her nails inside the camper. And the second thing I want to point out is that he keeps dragging dead bodies in his sleeping bag over to the alley and everywhere, and then he sleeps in this sleeping bag. No wonder he smelt putrid. I cannot even begin to describe how much I hate this fucker. As for Janice Irvine, the very first victim found, Morris never admitted to killing her, but police have said that the MO for Janice's murder was almost identical to all of Morris's other victims, so as far as they're concerned, he was the killer. But there was no evidence linking him to her murder, so no charges were ever brought against Morris for Janice's death. Morris was found guilty on 5 counts of murder. The court stated that all 5 murders were carried out in a especially cruel and especially heinous or depraved manner. With respect to the especially cruel part of the conviction, a Dr. Keene testified that strangulation victims are conscious for at least a short period, and they do experience great pain before they lose consciousness. With respect to the heinous and depraved aspect of the murders, the prosecutors argued that Morris had kept the bodies after they began to decompose because he enjoyed the odor of decomposition. He also argued that Morris had had sexual intercourse with all of the dead bodies except for Shantaria's. The prosecutor focused on the selective skin slippage on all the bodies and the presence of semen on some of the victims, despite Morris's insistence that he had used condoms during sex. Oh, right. Sure. I'm sure you used condoms. You know what? There aren't enough swear words for this piece of crap. During the penalty phase of the trial, Morris's lawyers tried to mitigate his circumstances by stating to the court that he had had several responsibilities placed on him at a young age by his working parents, as he was the oldest. And that caused trauma to poor baby shit-rat Morris. As well, he had had problems with his appearance and body odor throughout his life. Really? Oh, okay. So if you're the stinky kid in class, you get to be a sick, disgusting killer with no regard for human life? I didn't know that was the rule. Okay. Idiots. As well, his lawyers offered to the court that the shit rat had always had a good work record wherever he was working, and that he was currently, while in prison, trying to improve himself. This is pathetic. Well, I guess when you're drowning, you'll grasp at whatever looks like a rope, won't ya? Thankfully, the court wasn't swayed by these pathetic attempts to reduce the sentence, and Morris was sentenced to death. Currently, he is sitting on death row, and as of the recording of this episode, he has not yet exhausted all of his appeals. So he will remain on death row in Arizona until he runs out of appeals, and then they will take Cory Deonn Morris to the execution chamber and take his life. But sadly, he will die in a peaceful environment, unlike the women he murdered. And that, my friends, is the case of Cory Deonn Morris, or the Crackhead Killer. My thoughts. This is an absolutely horrific case. These women went through hell, and then the indignities that were done to them after death just cross a line that I can't even fathom. I hate the name that they have given him. The Crackhead Killer. It implies that the women he killed were crackheads. It just has a negative connotation to the victims, and it's affected their memories. I could hardly find any information on the majority of the victims, and the information I did find was scant at best. When victims are drug addicts or sex workers or marginalized people, the media doesn't give much attention to them, and that is just pathetic. If Morris's victims were working white women, you all would have known all about this case, and it would have received international coverage. These women were someone's family. Did some of them have issues with drugs, with homelessness? Absolutely. Does that mitigate their existence as a human in any way, shape, or form? No. Many killers will intentionally choose marginalized communities for their victim pool because historically, police, media, and society at large will not pay as much attention to their killings or their disappearances or their cases. This case is a perfect example of this. Let's look at one of the coroners who conducted a few of the autopsies, a Dr. Horn. This guy did a cursory inspection on the bodies and decided there was too much decomposition to find any trauma. When the toxicology reports came in and he saw that there was drugs in their systems, he declared their deaths to be due to drug intoxication. And just a side note, this Dr. Horn was also the coroner in the Jodi Arias case. He did a thorough job in that case. Now, I'm not saying he spent more time on Travis Alexander's autopsy than he did on the autopsy of our victims in our case today, but he kind of did. And Travis was a young, white, straight man, and Jodi Arias was a pretty white woman. And Horn became a bit of a celebrity after testifying in that trial because that trial was highly publicized, so Horn was able to sit on the stand and give a more detailed explanation of Travis Alexander's death than he did for our victims. But now Horn has come under fire for perjury because some say his testimony and his medical findings don't really match up. I'm not saying he did anything, it's just some food for thought for you. But out of all of this horror and tragedy, there is somewhat of a silver lining. Jade Velasquez's daughter, Noelle Altaha, was 13 years old when her mother was murdered. At the time, Noelle was living with her grandparents. She described the day she found out about her mother as an almost out-of-body experience. Noelle was in school that day when she was called down to the principal's office. Upon entering the office, she saw her aunt and uncle sitting in the office, both crying. Then her uncle broke the life-altering news to her. Jade and Noelle are Apache. The family wanted to lay Jade to rest in the traditions of their culture. In Apache tradition, all belongings of the deceased loved one are burned. Clothing, pictures, everything. It is the Apache's belief that this is a way of letting the person go. Noelle stated in an interview that at the time she didn't feel as though the mourning process was completed because they couldn't fulfill all of the traditions of her culture. All of Jade's clothing and belongings that were present at the murder scene were kept as evidence. And until Morris is executed, they probably will remain in an evidence locker, which doesn't allow Jade to have closure, if you want to use that word. Or let's just say, I hate that word closure. Let's just say, because Jade's belongings are being kept as evidence, Noelle and her family aren't able to complete their culture's traditional burial rituals. Because of the moniker that Morris received as the Crackhead Killer, gossip began running rampant through Noelle's small town. People thought that Jade was a drug addict or a sex worker because some of the other victims were allegedly sex workers. Eventually, Jade's sister Jan sent Noelle to a boarding school in Oregon as a way for Noelle to escape all the small town gossip that was present at the time when her mother was found. An interview with Noelle that I found in the Indian Country Today News, a nonprofit indigenous news organization, stated that as of 2018, the family had still not been able to retrieve Jade's clothing and personal effects from the police. Like I said, until he's exhausted all his appeals and are executed, that clothing and those belongings will probably remain with the police. Which sucks, and I completely understand how upset the family is because they can't complete their traditional practices, but you also don't want Morris to get out because evidence has been destroyed. I pray for Jade's family that Morris's appeals go quickly through the justice system so that they can receive Jade's belongings and clothing so they can complete their traditional Apache burial ceremonies. Noelle enrolled in college at 18, but had to pause her education when her grandmother passed away as she took custody of her younger sister. It was at this point that Noelle began feeling angry about her mother's death. But instead of allowing that anger to consume her, Noelle decided to do something productive with it. She returned to college once her sister was old enough to care for herself, and she sought out therapy that she desperately needed, and she was able to begin the process of healing. In 2018, when this article was published, Noelle was a graduate student at Columbia School of Social Work and was planning on pursuing a PhD. Noelle's goal was to help raise awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women. She was, at the time, giving talks on domestic violence and murder for different conferences with the goal of helping not only her sister, but other survivors of violence to start to move forward with their lives in healing. Noelle stated in her interview that even though her mom struggled with addictions, Jade taught Noelle survival skills and street smarts, how to be assertive and direct, how to look people in the eye and stand among giants with absolute confidence and self-assurance. Noelle states that Jade warned her of the dangers of addiction, the bucket of crabs syndrome, and other negative features of life on a reservation. For those of you who don't know what bucket of crabs syndrome is, it is something that happens within a community or a group. It is commonly seen in impoverished communities or indigenous reservations. Now, I'm not saying it occurs in every group or community, so douse your hot ass, Karen, but it does happen. It is a situation where individuals within a group undermine or pull down others who are succeeding or progressing. Often it's fueled by envy or insecurity. The negative behavior prevents people from reaching their full potential within the group, basically keeping everyone on the same level in the same situation. In a bucket of crabs, if one crab is attempting to climb out of the bucket, the other crabs will grab it and pull it back down with them in the bottom of the bucket. Noelle stated, quote, "He," meaning Morris, "is on death row, and my mom is still in my DNA. I still get to live my life. That's my closure." Unquote. As far as I can tell from a post in 2024 on Instagram, Noelle has completed her master's, and I am sure she is doing wonderful work out in her community, despite all the challenges she has faced. She is a beautiful young woman, inside and out. Well done, Noelle. Your mom is proud of you, and so are we. Just because someone chooses to live their life in an unhealthy way, it doesn't give anyone the right to exploit them and disregard their life. Every life has value. And with that, I think we'll leave it there for this week. Stay safe, get your pap test done, and enjoy your day today. This has been a Bitter Witness production.